What's up, my friends? Welcome to another whiskey review. My name is Andrew. Tonight we are doing a scotch review. In particular, this is a blended malt scotch whiskey review. What that means, if you don't know, is that this is a blended whiskey comprised of multiple distillery products. In this case, they're all malt whiskeys. They're all the product of single malt whiskey distilleries. If you haven't read this, tonight we have the Compass Box 3-Year Deluxe blended malt. Uh, you guys probably know, maybe you don't, that I have quite an affinity for Compass Box, which is why I'm reviewing this whiskey. Uh, I'm a really big fan of John Glaser, the head whiskey maker there. I love his philosophy when it comes to transparency in the whiskey industry, which is what this whole bottling of Compass Box 3-Year is about. And I also am a big fan of his philosophy on quality in blended scotch. He uses blended scotch not as a means to create a cheap product that he can sell, where a lot of blended scotch companies, I won't name names, they'll blend scotch as a way to add cheap grain whiskey to more expensive malt whiskey, and then they can make more of a profit because they've made it considerably cheaper. Whereas John Glaser, on the other hand, really takes different whiskeys and he blends them together with a final product always aimed at quality in mind. And a lot of times that quality comes at a really hefty price tag. This whiskey is, I believe, the most expensive whiskey at retail that I've ever reviewed. If you want a bottle of this, it's going to run you anywhere from probably $250 to $320. Now, what is this Compass Box 3-Year? Let's talk a little bit about the specifics, and then we'll actually get to tasting. So Compass Box 3-Year was a one-time limited release. It was released last year in 2016. In total, just over 3,000 bottles worth were released. And you see it's got the 3-year age statement. There's a bit of an inside joke there in the Scotch whiskey industry. 3 years is the legal minimum that a whiskey must be aged to be called Scotch. Now, obviously, this $300 bottle of whiskey is not only 3 years old. John Glaser has been battling the Scotch Whisky Association for years over transparency in advertising the ages of whiskeys. You may or may not know that in Scotch and in American whiskey, you can only show the youngest age on a bottle. The age statement can only contain the youngest whiskey. So if you have a blend of 5-year whiskey and 45-year whiskey, you can only show the 5-year on the age statement. You cannot say anything about it being 45 years old in any way. Now, that was meant to be a way to protect the consumer from false advertising. Say somebody makes a 5-year-old whiskey and then puts a teaspoon of 45-year-old whiskey into it. They shouldn't be able to advertise, oh, this whiskey has 45-year-old whiskey into it. That's really misleading. But it's gotten to the point where you do have reputable whiskey makers like Compass Box who cannot show all the components of their whiskey and can't be transparent about how they made it. In this case, Compass Box wasn't even trying to put the ages of all the components of their whiskey on the bottle. They were just showing on their website a very detailed breakdown of, hey, this whiskey has 13%, 10-year-old, 20%, 14-year-old, etc., breaking it down piece by piece. And the Scotch Whisky Association came after them, said, no, you can't be doing that. And so this whiskey, Compass Box 3-Year, is kind of a middle finger to the Scotch Whisky Association, advertising it as the legal minimum age for Scotch, but everything in here outside of a 0.4% total is much, much older than 3 years. Unfortunately, Compass Box cannot advertise the exact ages because of what we've just talked about, but suffice to say, besides that 0.4% that is 3 years old in here, everything else is old enough to justify by age a $200+ price tag. This whiskey is composed of malt whiskey from only 2 distilleries, the Clynelish Distillery up on the Highland Coast, and the Talisker Distillery on the Isle of Skye. It's got 0.4% of Clynelish, aged 3 years, to give it that 3-year age statement. It's got just about 90% much older Clynelish that was aged in a refill hogshead that used to have bourbon in it, so it'd be an ex-bourbon refill hogshead. And then about 10% of it is Talisker whiskey aged in first fill sherry casks. And so let's dig in. I think I've talked about it enough. Now, I guess I'll go ahead and taste it, and I'll say a little bit more about why I'm tasting this whiskey in particular. It's such an expensive whiskey. I fully understand that for 99% of viewers, this is probably out of your price range, and it's out of my price range as well. But there is a reason I'm reviewing that, and I'll get to it after I taste it. But let's go ahead and get into the whiskey itself. Start with the nose. I think the best way to describe the nose is perfumey. It's very floral. It's very aromatic. Right away, I notice lavender, honey, beeswax, and just like pollen in general, flowers, floral. It's sweet. It's very flowery. And there's a little bit of soft, delicate fruit in here. Things like raspberry, maybe even like passion fruit. It's silky, it's dense, it's crystal clear on the nose. I think that's the best way to describe it. Is it's just crystal clear, really inviting. It's balanced. It's exceptional on the nose. The palate starts upon entry with a lot of like a beeswax character, which is pretty common in Clynelish whiskeys. It has a very peculiar beeswax or waxy note that you find in it. Beyond the beeswax, there's a kind of a vanilla marshmallow type malty sweetness and kind of a fruit salad medley. Things like peach, strawberries, grapes, plums. If you really want to try and pick it apart, you might find 4 different fruits, but suffice to say, it's kind of a fruit medley. It's a little bit grassy on the tail end. There's a little bit of a mineral note. It's the best way that I can describe it. It's not peaty, it's not salty, it's just kind of rocky, minerally, if you will. There's a good amount of heather and maybe even just a little prickle of like cracked pepper in here as well. Do one more sip, we'll get the finish. On the finish, initially it gets really malty right after you swallow. Vanilla wafer, cake batter, maybe like candied sugary pear. And then it balances out. That mineral note comes back, maybe a little bit of candle wax, and it lingers it's almost sticky in the way that the finish coats your mouth. You can taste it on your cheeks, on the roof of your mouth, beneath your tongue. It's just fully mouth coating, like I said, almost to the point of sticky on the finish. Throughout, I think what really impresses me about this whiskey is how well balanced it is. Obviously, I think the nose was the most exceptional part of this whiskey just because of the depth, the layers and layers of flavor. But the palate and the finish stay exceptionally balanced. There's a lot going on, but it's not confused. I used the term clear earlier. You get a really nice interplay of sweet and malt and fruit and grass or mineral. Just lovely. This whiskey is expensive as it is. It provides a lot to be enjoyed. I'll go ahead and rate it, and then I'll talk about why I decided to review this whiskey with a video in the first place. I'm going to give this whiskey 88 out of 100. Remember, on the true 100-point scale that we use, It's not a letter grade scale, so I don't think of it like a B plus. But anything in the 80 to 90 range is what we would call excellent or exceptional. And so this being on the high side of the 80s really is an excellent whiskey, and that's what this score is meant to indicate. It's not, that transcendental 90 plus, totally blowing my mind, but it is really, really, really well crafted, really tasty. I think if I had a full bottle of this whiskey, I would really enjoy just studying it and getting to know it and really diving into these layers and layers of flavor that are here. I would have a ton of fun with that. Unfortunately, like I mentioned, this whiskey is well out of my price range. $250 minimum is probably what you're going to find it now. Remember, this was a one-time release, and so once those 3,000 bottles are gone, it's gone forever. Now, I have still found this whiskey in a number of stores, and so you probably wouldn't have to search hard still yet, maybe this year and into 2018 to find a bottle. But beyond that, it's going to go by the wayside and just become a legend. But we are approaching the holiday season, and if you're anything like me, you rarely splurge and buy a whiskey over $100, especially when it gets well over $100. You really want that unicorn, and it's maybe going to be a once or twice a year purchase. And if you're like me, you might be thinking about getting that bottle for yourself or for somebody as a gift around the holiday season. I know that I've already started kind of researching what I want that special bottle that I get myself for Christmas to be, and Compass Box 3 Year is one of them that I'm considering. And so thank you, John, for this sample and helping me out so I could have a taste before I drop that kind of cash. And so that's the point of this whiskey review is if you're a Scotch fan or if you're a Compass Box fan, maybe you're looking at, hey, I want to splurge and get something really nice for myself or nice for somebody I love or somebody that I work with. Would this be a good option? And so hopefully the tasting notes that I gave you are helpful. If that sounds appealing to you and you want to make that big splash purchase this holiday season, I would absolutely recommend this whiskey. Like I said, I think it is exceptionally crafted. I think there's layers of flavor to study and explore. In true Compass Box fashion, it's not, like a flavor bomb where it's just going to assault your taste buds. It's meant to be studied and really experienced in depth. You find that with most Compass Box whiskeys, and this is no exception. But this really is a great whiskey. It's up to you to decide whether or not it's worth it, if it's worth the price of a bottle. But if you ever get the chance to have a pour of this and, you love Scotch, have a pour of it. This is a fantastic Scotch. So hope that review was helpful. There is a lot of exciting things in store this fall and into winter between Brett and I as far as reviews go. I know I already got the next month of reviews planned out, and I'm freaking excited. There's going to be some awesome stuff coming. So thank you for putting up with me over my 2-week sinus infection where I drank a lot of whiskey, but I did not review a thing because I could not taste most of it. I wanted to review this a couple weeks ago, and I've had to put it off and then put it off because there's no way that I'm going to try and dive into this when I've only got 2 ounces of it when I don't know if I can taste and smell 100%. So glad to finally get this out to you guys. Let me know if you have any other questions about it. I would love to talk about it more or about any kind of whiskey in general. So have a great night, WBSE. Cheers.